Have you ever felt an unexplained chill crawl down your spine in the middle of the night? Had that eerie sensation that someone was watching you even when you were alone? What if I told you that in some places, that feeling isn't just imagination, it's inheritance, it's bloodline, it's fate. This story doesn't begin with an ancient book or a whispered incantation. It begins with a frightened little girl, caught between visions and whispers, who would one day understand that her eyes could see more than the world allowed. Deep in Tlaxcala, where rural traditions still echo the weight of old whispers and reversed prayers, a silent war unfolds between forces we rarely understand. In this land of cornfields, witchcraft, and spiritual protection, the narrator and many before her fought battles against dark energy, spiritual harassment, and the dreaded fireballs that tore through the sky as signs of supernatural confrontation. But don't think this is just another ghost story. This is about a lineage of women who carry the gift or curse of spiritual inheritance. Spirits, or animus, appear in dreams, creep through shadows in the bedroom, and even wander the fields, demanding courage and wisdom to face them. And sometimes, you must choose between revenge and forgiveness, power and redemption. If you've made it this far, get ready. This isn't just a tale, it's a descent into the hidden realms, into the scars left by supernatural clashes, and the strength it takes to know when to fight and when to let go. Because in the end, we all carry a piece of what we try to deny. And maybe, just maybe, you carry this gift too. I've seen things since I was a child. Things no one else could see. Sometimes it was just a shadow in the corner of the room. Other times, faces would form on the walls or voices would whisper my name when everyone else was asleep. I thought I was imagining it, just a child's fantasy, until I started seeing the same visions in different places, with different people. Eventually, I realized these weren't made up. They were anima spirits trapped between worlds, drawn to me, asking for attention, protection, or sometimes just silence. At first, it was terrifying. Sleeping felt like punishment because that's when the visions hit hardest. There were nights I was afraid to close my eyes, already bracing for the next encounter. Sometimes, I'd wake up with pressure on my chest like someone was trying to suffocate me. Other times, it was just a cold, heavy stillness in the air. I would learn later that these were signs of negative energy, or worse, of spiritual harassment. My childhood wasn't filled with play, it was a quiet initiation into the invisible world. My mother called it the sensitivity. When I asked her what it meant, she just looked into my eyes and said, "You see what others can't. Just like your grandmother. Just like me." That's when it clicked. This was part of me, of our female lineage. Not a curse, but a spiritual inheritance passed down through generations. A gift that could heal and protect, but also attract dangerous things, especially when misunderstood. It was like carrying a lit candle through the darkest night. It offered light, yes, but it also called out to everything hiding in the shadows. I learned to accept it, but I never grew complacent. I started writing down my dreams, paying close attention to how my body felt when a spirit was near. I discovered ways to protect myself: amulets, specific prayers, even herb baths. My aunt once taught me how to pray softly for lost souls, asking them to move on peacefully. That helped a lot, especially once I understood that not everything that scares us wants to hurt us. And so, between fear and fascination, I began building my own path through witchcraft and faith. The root of it all ran deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just about might, it was about the women who came before me. In the rural hills of Tlaxcala, surrounded by fields, mountains, and whispered stories around the fire, I discovered my lineage stretched far beyond borders. My grandmother had migrated from South America, bringing with her not just prayers and amulets, but deep knowledge of folk witchcraft. In her homeland, she was already known as a healer and a seer. That spiritual inheritance pulsed through our veins like blood, silent but alive. My mother was more discreet. She performed her rituals with herbs behind the house, buried items under the full moon, and always knew when someone in the family had been cursed or looked at. She never explained everything, but she never hid it either. We had an unspoken agreement: I'd ask, and she'd answer as far as she could. She gave me my first amuleted thread, a rue leaf, and a dried garlic clove. "This is to keep what isn't yours away," she said. And even without fully understanding, I wore it like sacred armor. The wisest of them all was Aunt Socorro. She believed every woman in our lineage was born with a mission to protect, to cleanse, or to guide. And the gift of sensing animus was the most dangerous of all, because it could heal or drive you mad. She read palms, performed smoke cleansings, and sometimes rolled her eyes back mid-ritual. It looked like something out of a horror movie, but no one laughed. She was respected, feared, sometimes avoided. But deep down, everyone knew when the negative energy hit, hers was the house they ran to. Over time, I realized that witchcraft, for us, wasn't a game or a quirky choice. It was survival. Each woman in the family had faced her own supernatural showdown, each in her own way. Some with forgiveness, others with vengeance. It wasn't something we discussed openly at family gatherings, but there was always a glance, a silence, a shared understanding. It was like we carried a collective memory, ancestral, raw. Something that came from deep within the earth, woven into the hidden seams of our grandmother's skirts. The first time I saw something real, it was under my bed. Not a monster like kids usually imagine, but a human figure, pale, hollow-eyed, staring straight at me. I froze. A cold chill surged through my stomach, so strong it felt like my body turned to ice. It was like the air had been sucked from the room. When I called my mother, she just looked at me calmly and said, "Breathe. They come when you're afraid." That's how it always was. The most intense encounters happened on nights when fear had already taken over. Over time, I learned to tell when something was near. The lights would flicker for no reason, dogs would bark at empty spaces, and my body would react: goosebumps, dizziness, nausea. Sometimes I even fainted. My grandmother told me those were signs of spiritual attack, switches trying to drain life energy. They didn't wear cloaks or fly on broomsticks. They lived among us, camouflaged, sometimes even part of daily life. And the worst part? They could cause sickness, accidents, even death. People in our community died in strange ways, and everyone whispered it was a curse. One night, I heard 3 sharp knocks on my window. When I looked out, I saw a hooded figure standing in the field, eyes glowing with a strange light. My heart nearly leapt from my chest. I tried to pray, but the words got stuck in my throat. Then I remembered the reversal prayer my aunt taught me, a blessing said backwards, meant to confuse hostile spirits. I whispered it fast. And it worked. The figure vanished into smoke. Only later did I realize it wasn't just a spirit. It was a witch, testing me. These experiences taught me that seeing wasn't the worst part. The worst was feeling. Because your eyes don't always catch what your body already knows. Some mornings I'd wake up with scratches on my arms or bruises, like I'd fought something in my sleep. And maybe I had. Witches, when they attack, don't come gently. It's a full-blown supernatural confrontation. And those who don't know how to defend themselves are either driven mad or forgotten. I was still young, but I was starting to understand life would never be ordinary. In rural Tlaxcala, fear wasn't unusual, it was routine. Every mountain seemed to hide a secret. Every gust of wind felt like it carried someone's whisper. People didn't talk openly about witchcraft, but their habits said enough. Hanging corn cobs on doors, wearing shirts inside out after sunset, never calling someone by name at night. These were common practices, passed down like sacred recipes. No one questioned them. In a land heavy with energy, caution was survival. It was there that I learned the spiritual world wasn't just made of soft prayers and white lights. There was a darker side, full of hidden grudges, malevolent spirits, and energies that fed off fear. My mom scattered rock salt in the corners of our house. My grandmother burned garlic peels over charcoal in a clay pot to clean the air. And every ritual came with a quiet murmur to keep out what doesn't belong. Nothing was done by chance, everything was a sign. Kids were taught early not to play near the cornfields after dusk, because that's where the fireballs were said to appear. These lights floated across the sky like living torches, leaving a trail of silence behind them. They said they were witches traveling, and anyone who dared to look at them straight on would lose their soul. I saw one once and I swear, my whole body went numb. It wasn't a shooting star, a drone, or imagination. It was real. And everyone knew it. They just didn't speak it aloud so they wouldn't attract attention. That was the world I grew up in, ears tuned to whispered stories, heart always half racing. Fear was real, but it was also a teacher. It taught me to observe, to listen to what wasn't said, to feel the energy of a space. And most of all, to protect myself. Every prayer, every amulet, every tiny ritual was part of a bigger pact with the unseen. Because in the countryside, when the sun sets, those who know, know. And those who don't learn the hard way. The stories weren't just folklore, they had names, dates, victims. The one that hit the hardest was little Javier. He went missing one cloudy afternoon while collecting firewood with his grandfather. The whole village joined the search, but days later they found only his body, eyeless, with strange marks across his skin, and a burned symbol carved into his chest. No one spoke out loud, but the whispers were unanimous: witchcraft. The air in the village grew heavy for weeks. Even the animals seemed to know something had crossed the line. These stories repeated with disturbing frequency. Another time, a woman showed up covered in blisters after arguing with a neighbor known for working with forces. The doctor said it was an allergic reaction, but those who knew the history weren't fooled. It was a spell. My aunt was called to cleanse the house. She used lemons, charcoal, and a curse-breaking prayer. The stench that rose from the home was unbearable. They said even the chickens stopped laying eggs for weeks. Rural traditions had answers for everything, and they were rarely scientific. These cases stuck with me. This wasn't just about visions or strange sensations anymore. It was physical, tangible, tragic. I started writing everything down, tracking patterns, asking the elders what they remembered. That's how I discovered that around certain times of year, especially near Dia de los Muertos, the number of missing people and fireball sightings increased. And, coincidentally or not, that was when the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. It was also when the darkest spells were cast. But those horrors didn't just feed my fear, they strengthened my sense of duty. I wasn't just someone who saw things anymore, I was part of a lineage that had to intervene. And the more I learned, the more I understood the cost of the gift. It wasn't just spiritual protection, it was a war. An invisible war against forces that wanted to control, scare, and destroy. The missing children, the nighttime attacks, the sudden outbreaks, none of it was random. And by then, I could no longer pretend it was. The revelation hit like a windstorm that knocks everything down. Estella, my childhood friend, had always been quiet but loyal. We grew up together, sharing prayers, sharing nighttime scares, and I never imagined danger was so close. One day, during a spiritual cleansing we did together, she hesitated when touching a sacred symbol. The amulet burned her skin. That was the moment everything started unraveling. Her sister, Isabella, was strange, soft-spoken, with that hollow look wasn't just peculiar. She was a powerful witch. But not just any kind. The kind that fed off vengeance and souls. I found out by accident. Overheard two older women at the market buying corn, whispering that girl in the blue house. They've seen her as a fireball. My stomach dropped. That description fit Isabella perfectly. That night, I went to Estella and asked her directly. In tears, she confessed. Her sister had made an old pact, seeking revenge against someone who had cursed their mother. Since then, she had been practicing a much darker kind of witchcraft. And now, she knew I was close. And that I knew too much. The first threat came in a dream. Isabella appeared, cloaked in black, her eyes glowing like embers. She said I should stay out of it. When I woke up, my windows were wide open even though I had locked everything. Then came the signs: dead chickens at my doorstep, dolls with nails stuck in them, a symbol burned into the ground outside my home. The spiritual harassment had begun. This was high-level sorcery, and I had to move carefully. One wrong step could trigger a supernatural confrontation, and I wasn't ready. Not yet. The hardest part was the betrayal. Estella was like a sister to me. Knowing she had been living with that secret tore me apart. But I also saw her pain. She was just another victim of the same legacy. That's when I realized not everyone who walks the path of witchcraft chooses it. Sometimes they're pushed by pain, anger, or desperation. Still, I couldn't let the negative energy take over. It was time to strengthen my spiritual defenses and accept that sooner or later, the confrontation would come. With or without warning. After Isabella's threat, my life became a battlefield. Not one with swords or armies, but with shadows, nightmares, and silence. The nights stopped being dark, they became hostile territory. The nightmares started vaguely disjointed images, faraway voices. But soon they became vivid. I dreamed of my house burning, of Estella crying out for help, of faceless children being dragged into the woods. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing, sure that something had been in the room. And most nights, there had. During the day, it wasn't much better. I saw shadows darting across corners, dark shapes slipping through the kitchen, and sometimes felt eyes watching me even when I was alone. My amulets began breaking for no reason. One, a gift from my grandmother, shattered in the middle of the night, scattering its seeds across the floor like it had been crushed. I knew what that meant: my protection had been broken. A clear sign of spiritual attack. In moments like that, I ran to prepare cleansing baths with rue, rosemary, and coarse salt. It helped, but only for a while. The most intense manifestation happened on a waning moon night. I was about to go to sleep when I heard a deep buzzing, like a giant insect. I ran to the window and saw a fireball hovering above the roof. I wasn't dreaming. It spun slowly, as if searching for me. My heart raced, my legs froze. That was Isabella in her form of fire and malice. I slammed the window shut, prayed every prayer I knew, burned charcoal, sprayed holy water in every corner of the house. But the fear lingered for days, clinging to my skin like cemetery dust. I knew then it wouldn't stop until I faced her. But the fear of a supernatural showdown was paralyzing. I didn't want to be part of a war. I just wanted to sleep in peace. But that wasn't an option anymore. My lineage's traditions were clear: when a fireball appears at your door, it's not just your energy they want your soul. And me? I wasn't about to give up anything without a fight. It was time to gather the amulets, revisit the old prayers, and prepare my body. The war was near and the end was approaching. The night of the confrontation, everything felt off. Too quiet. The moon barely lit the sky, and the village dogs were silent, a bad omen. I had already prepared a cleansing bath at dusk, incense of myrrh and rue burning, and a protective circle traced with salt and charcoal around my house. Tied to my waist was a cord woven from strands of hair by my grandmother, soaked in rue oil. Around my neck, I wore the broken amulet I had reforged with silver and prayer. It felt like stepping into an ancient battle where every detail mattered. Around midnight, she came. The fireball returned, but this time, it descended and morphed into a human figure wrapped in smoke. Isabella, or what was left of her, was no longer the woman I once knew. Her eyes burned red, her skin looked like smoldering ash. She didn't speak. She just advanced. I started praying hard, the way my aunt taught me, steady voice, firm stance, eyes forward. Every word a shield, every verse a blade. The air around us buzzed like the world was about to crack open. I threw sulfur powder around her. She hesitated. The sacred cord in my hands began to tremble. I knew it was time. I cast the cord over her while reciting the binding prayer. Her body convulsed. She let out a scream that didn't sound human. And then silence. She dropped to her knees. She wasn't dead. I could have ended it, but something stopped me. I remembered what my grandmother once said: a witch who asks for forgiveness can still be saved. Isabella looked into my eyes, a dark tear rolling down her cheek. And right then, in the middle of all that pain, I chose forgiveness. It wasn't easy. Forgiveness is the most powerful spell and also the most dangerous. To release someone from the dark takes strength but also compassion. I whispered a liberation prayer and allowed the circle to open. Isabella collapsed backward, dissolving into smoke. The silence returned. The battle left its marks. I lost sleep, hair, weight. But I gained something bigger: the end of a cycle. The witch wasn't just my enemy, she was a twisted reflection of who I could have become. And in that moment, between smoke and ashes, we made peace no one else would ever understand. After that night, something shifted inside me. It was as if an ancient weight had finally been laid down. Isabella disappeared from the village. No one ever saw her again, not as a woman, not as a fireball. A few days later, Estella came to find me. She looked different, calmer, grounded, her eyes no longer frantic. She told me that after the confrontation, she began studying witchcraft more seriously, but now guided by light, by healing, by protective prayers. The energy around her had changed. As if, by freeing her sister, she had freed herself from that dark legacy too. I, on the other hand, made an unexpected choice. After everything I had lived, visions, ominous, spells, spiritual battles, I realized I didn't want to carry that burden anymore. Not in the same way. The spiritual inheritance in my bloodline was powerful, yes, but exhausting. So, I chose to end the cycle. I stored away my amulets, buried my sacred objects in the forest, where the earth was rich and still. Witchcraft would always be a part of me, but it didn't need to define me. I chose a simpler life, away from the occult, closer to people, to peace. It wasn't abandonment. It was a conscious decision. I devoted myself to my family, to tending the land, to teaching my children to respect the mysteries without forcing them to carry what wasn't theirs. Sometimes I still feel the presence of an anima watching from a distance, like a soft reminder of who I was. But now, she doesn't bring fear. Maybe she even protects me. The rural traditions still live on in the village, but my role in that story had come to an end. And for the first time in a long while, the night's silence was just silence. Estella and I walked different paths, but we deeply respected one another. She continued her studies and became a spiritual guide for other women in the village. As for me, I became the keeper of stories, not of magic. I shared everything with those willing to listen, always with a warning: no power is worth losing your soul. And so, between earth and sky, between fear and forgiveness, I closed a cycle that had been written for generations. And I left space for another woman in the lineage to one day choose her own beginning in her own way. And now, tell me, how many invisible battles have you fought without even realizing it? Maybe they didn't come as fireballs or shadows watching you at night, but maybe as recurring nightmares, an unexplained chill, or that strange energy you feel when you walk into certain places. The spiritual world isn't just for the gifted few, it's all around us, all the time. The real difference is who chooses to see and who chooses to act. Have you ever wondered where your family's gifts come from? What stories do the women in your bloodline carry in silence? Maybe you've inherited something too: a sensitivity, a strength, a connection to what's unseen. What will you do with it? Will you deny it, hide it, or transform it? The story you've just heard isn't just about witchcraft, spells, and rituals. It's about choice, forgiveness, redemption. It's about how even in darkness, there's always a path toward light, but you'll need courage to walk it. So why not start now? Think about what in your life is calling out for healing. Look into your roots. Talk to your elders. Light a candle and sit in silence for a few minutes. What do you feel? What do you hear? Because sometimes, all the spirit world needs is your attention. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share it with someone else who might carry something ancestral in their heart. We still have many stories to tell. And who knows, maybe the next one will be yours.